So this is a bit of an ad hoc video. I'm in the waterfall country in Wales, just at the bottom of Brecon Beacons, and I've actually come over here to see Format High Tech and do some filming with them, a little interview as an ambassador, so hopefully you should see that on the website very soon. The reason for this video is that I wanted to actually show you what I'm actually looking for when it comes to landscape photography and actually long exposure photography, which is my kind of niche. So excuse the kind of filming, I've come completely unprepared, no audio, no video stuff, I'm just using my phone, so I hope this is alright. So first I wanted to show you the sort of clouds I'm looking for, so I'm going to just switch you around. So these sort of clouds are actually perfect for long exposures. You want blue skies and kind of patchy clouds like this. And the reason for this is that when you do a long exposure, all these clouds will streak and they'll turn very blurry. If you've got complete overcast clouds, then obviously it will just be washed out and a sea of white in the sky, which is fine for minimalist black and white shots, which I sometimes do. And on the opposite end of the scale, if you've got blue skies with nothing in it, it's a bit bland, there's no real detail, and essentially I tend to cut the sky out or not actually shoot altogether, depending on what I'm actually shooting. So I'm going to bring you down here. Now this is, as I say, waterfall country. Got some lovely streams and mini waterfalls, and I'm actually walking up to the main waterfalls, which are a bit further up. Now if I take you down here, it looks like quite a nice view, but it's not really the sort of photo I'm looking for. You could snap this away, which will look something like this, but it's not great. So the idea is, when you see waterfalls and streams, you want to try and get down as close to the water as possible, really. And the reason for that is, in my view, everyone sees it from this angle, but not so much when you're almost at the water's edge. You can create some really nice effects, especially when you've got things in the foreground like rocks, pebbles, that kind of thing, which creates a little bit more depth into the image. So let's carry on. So I've made my way down to the water's edge, and I thought this image could look quite nice when I was up walking up the path, but I don't know, I'm not quite feeling it at the moment. Now I'll tell you why. Obviously you've got these two waterfalls here, which are nice little streams that are running down, and you've got a little bit of foreground things here, but you've also got this branch here that's sticking out. And I know if I get down low, obviously you can kind of eliminate that. It starts to look like quite a nice image, especially with the reflections. But then you have to think about what's going on above the waterfalls here. You know, is this just going to be a mess? Is it going to be overblown? So overexposed? I don't know, maybe a slightly long exposure might create some reflections and draw your attention into the bottom of the image. So I might just shoot this one and see how it comes out. But it's not the sort of photo I'm looking for. So for this shot, we're going to be using my trusty Format High Tech Firecrest polarizer. The reason for using this is to either create some reflections off the water or to make the water transparent, so it changes the right light refraction as it bounces off the water's surface. This just screws onto the front of your lens. As you can see, if I just adjust this, you can see the exposed image. With the polarizer on, if I rotate the polarizer and have a look at the water, you can see this now change. And that's how polarizers work. It's changing the way the light hits the surface of the water, whether it penetrates through or bounces right off. Now, I want to actually make a little bit of reflection, so I don't want the light to be bouncing off, as you can see. I want it to actually pierce through the water, and this creates some reflections, and it also changes the contrast between the rocks, the background, and then the actual water itself. It gives it a little bit more punch. Okay, next I'm going to actually use this, which is the Mark II Format High-Tech Firecrest 100mm lens filter holder, and this just pops over the front like so, and then screws into the polarizer. Next up, I'm going to use one of these. This is a soft edge graduated filter. You can see from it's clear at the bottom and tinted at the front, at the top, sorry. And this is a 3-stop, so it's going to cut the amount of lights by 3 stops at the top. The reason for this is that we can balance the brightest part of the image, which is usually the sky, with the foreground. So it balances it all out, and so the sky is not overexposed when we take the image. This just simply slides into the filter holder, and if you're going to be using another filter like an ND filter, neutral density filter, you want to put the ND filter as close to the lens as possible, with this further out. So this is the ND filter I'm going for this shot. This is the Firecrest Ultra series, and this is a 10-stop filter. As you can see, it's really dark, and it's dark because it cuts the amount of light that's coming into the lens, and this allows you to increase the shutter speed, or the shutter time it's open for, to create a long exposure. Now, anything that's open in a long exposure, you may or may not, if you're new to this, know that the longer it's open, the more blurred moving images or moving objects will appear. And that's the reason how you get waterfalls that look like flowing, almost like milk texture. So I'm going to put this on. Now, before I put this on, it's always good to take an exposure and a focus reading from the camera itself, because when you put this on, it's going to be very difficult for the camera to focus on it. Excuse my head, it's out of shot, but it's just a talking head at the moment. So I'm going to actually focus first and then switch the lens to manual mode, and that way I can put this on and then not touch the lens at all. It will still be in focus. Okay, so now I'm going to take the shot. I'm going to go for 30 seconds and see how it's exposed from that point onwards. So as you can see the image here, this is straight out of the camera. This is the shot that's just been done, and this is at 30 seconds. I did bump the ISO up a little bit because it was a bit too dark before. This is at ISO 200, I believe, at f11, and 30-second exposure. So you can see that the graduated filter, which we put on first, this one here, this is cutting out the amount of light coming into the lens only at the top, and then leaving the foreground nicely exposed as well. So this balances out the top area with the bottom area. If you just look with the naked eye, you can see that that's actually quite a lot brighter than the foreground, so that's what that job does. And the second one is the ND filter, the 10-stop ND filter, which darkens the whole image essentially, the amount of light that's coming in through the lens, and this kind of makes everything a little bit more smooth because we're having to increase the amount of time that the shutter is open for. So anything that moves, as I mentioned, gets smoothed out. You can now see some nice reflections on the small waterfalls here, and a couple of the rocks reflections as well, including the sky at the bottom. It's not an image that is amazing, but it's a very quick demonstration as to how the long exposure works. So a question I often get asked is, can you do long exposures without filters? Well, kind of, but it won't be as long as you'd hope to be able to achieve. And the reason for that is that if you expose for a long period of time, you're actually drawing in more light into the frame. Think of it like a lighter under a piece of paper, or a torch of some sort. Essentially, the longer you hold it to that piece of paper, the more it's going to burn, and it creates a wider burn into the image. Essentially, that's what you're doing, you're burning into the image. So if you're letting in more light, obviously you need to decrease the amount of light in the first place, almost like putting sunglasses onto your lens. So you're making it darker so you can allow more light to enter the lens for a longer period of time. That's what ND filters are actually designed for, as well as other different things in cinematography as well, but that's how you can create the long exposure shots. Right, so I've been walking along this path up the left hand side, and I found a relatively safe path down onto these rocks. They're a little bit mossy, so you have to be careful when you tread. And the reason being is that this stream creating a nice little cascade over there. So yes, I could just capture that on its own, but it doesn't really give it much depth. So I'm looking to actually follow the stream all the way down to here and create some lots of little lovely little cascading waterfalls. So if ever you want to take some pictures like this and capture some long exposures, you're probably going to need an ND filter of some sort. Have a look on my website to have a look at the sort of gear that I use personally, and if you do decide to get yourself some ND filters from Format High Tech, be sure to use my code, which is Conway10. It'll give you 10% discount on every single order. So it's well worth checking it out. So I hope that's been quite useful for you. As I say, it's just the kind of things that I look for whenever I'm taking an image. And if you ever want to get into long exposure photography and you're in the London area, I am starting up my workshops again. Usually start around springtime, so now's the perfect time. Have a look on my website and make a booking, and hope to see you soon. Take care and all the best.